There is something mysterious happening in the vast cosmos as we speak. We call this phenomenon 3Chi Atlas. However, that doesn't mean we actually know what it is or what its purpose might be. 3Chi Atlas is peculiar. Its appearance is unusual, its movements are strange, and its composition seems to be made of substances we cannot identify. The most curious thing is that throughout all the time we've spent studying this object, new evidence has emerged suggesting that it may in fact have been observing us for an even longer period of time. Let's start with some recent images of 3Chi Atlas, captured by astrophotographers in the isolated deserts of Namibia, at the southern tip of Africa. This is one of the darkest places on Earth, perfect for astronomical observations, and the photographers took advantage of a lunar eclipse when Earth's shadow completely blocked the sunlight, creating the darkest possible sky, and thus offering the clearest view of space. During this event, they could have photographed any object in the sky, but they chose to focus on 3Chi Atlas, and what they found was astonishing. The object was glowing with a vivid green hue in the night sky. Based on what we know about 3Chi Atlas, it shouldn't be emitting that green glow, or at least there's no natural explanation for it. The prevailing theory among scientists and astronomers is that 3Chi Atlas is an interstellar comet. In many ways, it's similar to other comets we've seen crossing space. It has a large diffuse cloud of gas and dust around it, called a coma, and also a characteristic fan-shaped tail. However, this comet is different. It comes from a completely distinct star system, far beyond our galaxy. Because of that, we expect it to be somewhat peculiar. The problem with 3Chi Atlas is that it constantly behaves in ways that don't make sense. For example, it's not unusual for comets to appear green, and since this is relatively common, we already know a lot about the chemical process that causes that color. It happens when carbon molecules in the coma are exposed to the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Specifically, it involves diatomic carbon C2, which consists of two carbon atoms bonded together. Therefore, if 3Chi Atlas were a normal comet, it would have many of these carbon molecules on its surface, which would make it glow green under sunlight. However, after numerous observations conducted throughout the summer, using virtually all major telescopes, we discovered that 3Chi Atlas actually has no such carbon molecules in its composition. It's practically devoid of C2, and yet, it still glows an intense green. Why does this happen? We don't know. Aliens? Maybe they just have a preference for green lights. Furthermore, we know that the coma around 3Chi Atlas is rich in carbon dioxide CO2, a molecule composed of carbon and oxygen, which is very different from C2. That makes the object bright, but it shouldn't be responsible for the green color. The presence of CO2 in large quantities is also quite unusual, since the concentration of H2O water vapor in the coma of comets is usually much higher than that of CO2. However, that's not the only strange thing about the coma of 3Chi Atlas, as it also contains metals, especially nickel. While the presence of metal isn't uncommon in comets, what's odd is that 3Chi Atlas is exhibiting this phenomenon now. Many comets contain metal, and that metal often ends up evaporating into the coma, but this only happens when the comet gets close to the sun, where the heat is strong enough to vaporize it. 3Chi Atlas, however, is far from the sun, and the presence of nickel was first detected when it was still between Mars and Jupiter. Therefore, there's no reasonable explanation for the object releasing so much metal, especially nickel, unless you consider the theory that 3Chi Atlas might be an alien spacecraft, in which case rocket engines are made of metallic alloys, such as those containing nickel. When those engines burn, a great deal of nickel ends up in the exhaust gases. They would also release large amounts of CO2. Of course, this probably doesn't mean we're dealing with an alien spacecraft, but there's something even stranger about the way 3Chi Atlas is moving through the solar system. This movement likely has nothing to do with rocket engines that may or may not exist. What's interesting, however, is that the trajectory and velocity of 3Chi Atlas have remained almost unchanged since we first observed it. From its discovery in early May until now in October, it hasn't accelerated, decelerated, or significantly altered its direction. That may not seem anomalous at first glance, but if it were a regular comet, it should be moving in a much more dynamic way. Comets heat up as they approach the sun, which causes them to melt, or technically speaking, to sublimate, meaning a solid turns directly into gas. The release of gases during this process tends to push the comet through space, acting almost like a thruster. Therefore, a normal comet should change its speed and direction depending on which side is facing the sun. This motion is known as non-gravitational acceleration, NGA. Normally, the average daily variation is measured by distance. But there's something even stranger about the way 3Chi Atlas is moving through the solar system. This movement likely has nothing to do with rocket engines that may or may not exist. What's interesting, however, is that the trajectory and velocity of 3Chi Atlas have remained almost unchanged since we first observed it. When compared to 2I Borisov, the most typical of interstellar comets, which showed a variation greater than 100 kilometers per day, about 100 times more movement than Atlas, the difference becomes even more striking. Moreover, Comet Hale-Bopp, one of the largest ever discovered in our solar system, had an average variation of more than 10 kilometers of NGA per day, roughly 10 times more than Atlas, and Oumuamua surpassed them all, changing its direction by more than 1,000 kilometers per day at certain points. Therefore, even when compared with other interstellar objects, 3G Atlas is moving in a very peculiar way, maintaining a trajectory so stable that it almost seems intentional, as if it were being guided through the solar system. Of course, there's a natural explanation for this, but if 3G Atlas were a guided craft, it wouldn't just be capable of maintaining a steady course, it would also have the ability to change its trajectory whenever it wanted. Como si estuviera siendo guiado por el propio sistema solar. Claro. Now, we expect 3 Atlas to pass on the opposite side of the Sun relative to Earth as it moves through the inner solar system. This means we won't have another chance to observe it up close, unless the object slows down while passing by the Sun and emerges on the other side, waiting for us. Here's a crazy theory that might actually make sense. Have you ever heard of the WOW signal? This signal was detected in 1977 by astronomers at Ohio State University using a radio telescope called Big Ear, a big ear that listened to what was happening in space. That day, scientists detected something so unusual that the operator wrote WOW on the datasheet, giving the signal its famous name. What shocked them so much was a narrowband radio signal of immense power that lasted 72 seconds and came from a deep point in interstellar space. We know the signal wasn't generated by any terrestrial technology, nor by the Sun or any planet in our solar system. It simply appeared from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. The first remarkable thing about the WOW signal is the sheer amount of energy required to emit a narrowband radio frequency across space. If it had an alien origin, the civilization responsible would have to be so advanced that it could harness the power of a star. If it were a natural phenomenon, it would most likely have been caused by some kind of stellar activity. Furthermore, the WOW signal's frequency matched the hydrogen line, the frequency produced by hydrogen atoms. That frequency is 1420 MHz, and the WOW signal had the exact same value. This suggests that if someone wanted to send a simple, recognizable message to any advanced civilization, they would probably use that frequency. In the 50 years since, we have never detected another radio signal quite like it. What makes this even more intriguing is that astronomers have managed to trace the trajectory of 3 Atlas, and are almost certain that it also originates from the direction of Sagittarius, the very same direction as the WOW signal. That's quite a coincidence, and it has led some scientists to wonder whether the WOW signal didn't actually come from a distant star, but rather from our visitor 3G Atlas, which in 1977 would have been on the outer edge of our solar system, beyond the orbit of Pluto. Perhaps it was simply giving us a warning of its arrival. Of course, this is just a theory, one that hasn't been proven true and probably never will be. But it also hasn't been proven false, and maybe that's what matters most as we continue to learn more about 3G Atlas. Objects like this challenge us to keep an open mind about the infinite possibilities the universe may offer. The truth is out there, and it's coming our way. To conclude, we invite you to continue following this fascinating journey through the cosmos and the discoveries that await us. The mystery of 3 Atlas is just one example of how the universe can be astonishing, full of enigmas yet to be uncovered. We don't know what the future holds, but we're certainly just beginning to scratch the surface of what's possible to understand beyond our reality. If you found yourself as intrigued by this mystery as we are, don't forget to follow us for more content about the cosmos, scientific discoveries and theories that challenge our understanding of the universe.